We can bring the rest of them.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you here, and once again, we thank Saya for hosting us, and we really look forward to this event. Thank you so much for making it this evening on a Thursday night, in the middle of a very hectic month where there's so much happening. We really appreciate the fact that you've all come here, and we really look forward to the dialogue and the discourse that's going to take place this evening. Just a little bit of information before we get to the program. If you need to use the bathroom, you just go out of the hall, you go right, and then the bathrooms are there. So my directions are not that great. And there'll be food and drinks served afterwards. If you need some drinks before, we do have water and juice out. Wine will only be served afterwards, just because we've seen in past experience that if you serve wine too early, the attention spans are not really there. So yeah, so the wine will be served afterwards. We hope that you enjoy the evening, that you enjoy the food that comes with it, and that you enjoy the dialogue, but that most importantly, you're able to use this evening as an opportunity to not only network, but to also change behaviors and change the behaviors of those around you. So just a little bit of information about Africa Matters. Africa Matters was started in April 2015, and the reason it was started was two reasons. The first is that Africa's got the largest youth population in the world, with over 226 million young people between 15 to 24. And for this to be an economic opportunity, we need to ensure that we are upskilling young people with the tools that they need to transform their communities. The second reason is because we felt that as Africans, we don't know enough about each other. And how can Africa matter to the world if we don't matter to one another? So we wanted to create a platform that is able to educate Africans about Africa and about other Africans, and to upskill Africans. So we're excited that this is our 4th year running. We've got a lot more programs and activities happening. And this event tonight forms part of what we call our Youth Leadership Development Program, where we've got different events taking place that are meant to educate and to inform. We've also got webinars that take place online. So if you're interested in watching any of our webinars, they're available twice a month, and from anywhere in the world, you're able to then live stream into the webinars that take place. We recently had one just this Monday on how do we create the Africa we want, and saying no to Afrophobia was one of the topics that came through. Next week, Monday, we have one on harnessing the youth demographic, which will be led by Miriam Algoni, who works at UNICEF. So it's exciting that we've got different speakers from different parts of the continent who are able to come and shed light on really important topics. We've also got our schools program. So if you check your pamphlets, it's got different activities that we do. Our schools program is all about how we can upskill young people in schools really quickly, because very often we realize that we lack certain skills only when we've reached our mid-20s. And we want to be able to nip that in the bud as soon as possible so that young people can start to lead as early as possible. So tonight's topic was inspired by the fact that, you know, as a continent, there is so much rejection of one another that is happening, particularly within the South African context, with the rise in xenophobic attacks, which was sparked this year by the one that happened in Durban not so long ago. And we wanted to be able to create a platform where we're able to discuss as Africans, how can we rid ourselves of Afrophobia? Where does it stem from? How do we deal with it? And more than that, how do we ensure that we're teaching younger Africans to not perpetuate this? Because the only way for us to rise as a continent is if we stand together. So tonight we've got some incredible speakers who have got different forms of experiences from different countries, and we're really happy to have them here. And we've got a brilliant moderator by the name of Patrick Hadima. Patrick and I have known each other for about 5 or 6 years now, and he's an incredible person. We both met in Stellenbosch as we were fighting against a lot of things within that context. I can't mention it because we're being live streamed, but just know we're fighting against a lot of things within that context. Very happy that we're both here and still standing. And just some information about our moderator. Patrick is a final year graduate LLB student here at this university. Before he enrolled for this program, he was studying at the University of Stellenbosch, and he graduated with a BA degree. At Stellenbosch, listen to this, he's got a lot of credentials. Patrick served as the president of the Stellenbosch Political Science Students Association, SCOSA, as well as the Student Representative Union, the Institutional Forum. He also served with me as Student Parliament, which was a really, really exciting time. He was previously served as a Secretary General of the Students for Law and Social Justice here at WITS. Patrick is really, really passionate about the development of Africa, social justice and human rights, and peace processes across the African region. He's written a number of opinion pieces of interest, and they've been published across numerous platforms and really, really influential papers, including the City Press and the Cape Times. So let's give a big, warm round of applause to Patrick.
Good evening to everyone. Thanks for coming here today. Let me do this. Let me call the speakers to the front to take their seats. All right. Okay, I'll begin by first introducing the speakers in front, then I'll proceed to the next step. Okay, to my right here. To my right is Mr. Sambulo Matebula. He's an international relations practitioner in the public sector. He holds a master's degree in political studies from the University of the Witwatersrand. He has been an international relations practitioner for over 10 years, having worked across various sectors and organizations, such as the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Southern African Liaison Office, the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, and the South African Human Rights Commission. May we please give him a round of applause. Again to my right, is Ms. Joyce Bobongo. As shown to be an ambitious young woman with a high level of interpersonal skills, she has always been deeply inquisitive about the world around her, constantly searching for ways to better the lives of the people she meets. These qualities led her to participating in a range of activities, even from secondary school level. Through her involvement in almost all youth at Sahia programs that involved having to be exposed and acquainted with a range of topics from environmental sustainability, the displacement of people due to political unrest, natural disasters, and rural-urban migration, to many other different internationally pressing topics to date in various model United Nations simulations. Stemming from this, Joyce was selected as one of the 2 only high school learners to form part of a delegation representing youth in the World Humanitarian Summit. regional consultations for Eastern and Southern Africa in 2014, where she helped advocate for the better inclusion of young people and other directly affected groups on such platforms. Please give a round of applause. Ms. Sophie Kanza is the co-founder of the Sophie A. Kanza Foundation, founded by Sophie and Louis Kanza, a passionate Pan-African change agent, peace activist, social entrepreneur, and leader, proudly Jera Congolese living in South Africa since the age of 3. Let us give a round of applause. Dr. Shakira Chonara is an award-winning health researcher, board activist, and the 2017 Women of the Year in Health in South Africa. She is a special appointment to the inaugural African Union Commission Youth Advisory Council and is a budding dynamic entrepreneur, the CEO and co-founder of Local Impact Solutions, a new startup focusing on public health, youth development, and driving the sustainability of NGOs worldwide. Let me please give a round of applause. Dear friends, tonight we are gathered here during the month of, or a month where we celebrate Africa, a month in which we celebrate our diversity as Africans. But this has not been without challenges in this continent. This continent has faced a lot of challenges, and one of them is Afrophobia or xenophobia, depending on how you term it. The African Union in its Agenda 2063, which is a policy document for the regional organization, has stated that one of their objectives is by the year 2063 is to make sure that Africa is a united continent. Africans are able to move freely around the continent. But this objective is moving at a very slow pace. Our leaders have taken their time in implementing this policy, and few countries have only been able to what should I say? Have only been able to achieve this objective. The rise of populism and hatred around the continent is one that we cannot abandon. There has been dispute between academics whether it is Afrophobia or xenophobia that our continent is facing right now. And I would like you, my dear friends, tonight as the audience to think about whether we should term it Afrophobia or xenophobia. As you may know, Afrophobia is termed as the fear of other Africans, and xenophobia is said to be the fear of foreigners. And I would like us to think about the distinction between the two terms. Finally, the law is not the only solution to curbing Afrophobia. There are other measures that need to be put in place. And I think this is what we'll have to discuss tonight. So without wasting time, I will give each speaker 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Then we'll proceed from there on. So who wants to start, or should I choose? Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Yes, yeah, or you can speak here, anything.
So the opening statement about the distinction?
No, the opening statement is anything that you have.
Oh.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. My name is Sambulo Mategula, as has been introduced, and I'm really privileged to be here. Without wasting time on my allocated 3 minutes, I just want to place on the discussion table quite squarely that I think South Africa is a xenophobic country. Again, there's been much debate about whether or not it's xenophobia, Afrophobia, and others even argue that it's pure criminality or pure criminal elements. Perhaps there could be some credence to the suggestions that it's Afrophobia, which is for me the most pronounced, possibly the most pronounced dimension of this hatred, as it were. But it doesn't remove the fault line which speaks to othering based on one's nationality. So whether you distinguish between Afrophobia or xenophobia, the consequences are the same for me. I happened to work for the South African Human Rights Commission in 2008 when the first significant or noticeable wave of xenophobic attacks swept the country. I was stationed in the deputy chairperson's office then, whose primary task it was to look after the rights of foreign nationals, as it were. And I mean, in the aftermath of all of that, we went to the camps to go and report on the conditions and some of the townships, and the devastation was heart-wrenching. It was horrific, absolutely horrendous, and something that's a memory that's etched in my mind and never to be forgotten. And for me, the crude or cruel irony, or both a crude and cruel irony, is how South Africa is a signatory to so many multilateral international instruments and conventions that guarantee the rights of dignified treatment of all people, including so-called foreign nationals residing in South Africa. And the irony is compounded by how the African continent features as an apex priority in South African foreign policy. In fact, this is backed by a study that was interestingly enough conducted by SAIA, which found that in terms of budget spend, proportion of budget spend, the African continent gets the biggest portion of the diplomatic budget spend that goes to the African continent. So it's interesting, the disjuncture between from a policy level how much priority we place on the African continent, but at a practical level it seems to be quite the opposite. So in my mind, if we're going to focus on the intra-African dimension, or Afrophobia, if we could call it that, it helps to take a closer look at some of the drivers of this thing. And I think firstly, there's something to be said about the physical space. Most of these xenophobic incidents occur in the townships. And we know townships by and large. I think most of us in South Africa, the majority of us grew up in townships, and we know that in townships by and large, these are generally spaces that are not conducive to any form of wholesome existence, human existence, even if we appeal to any internationally agreed upon indicators of the quality of human life. The townships are found wanting. So there's something to be said about township spaces and the things that happen in township spaces. The second thing for me is what I call our parochial disposition as South Africans. We have an incredible insularity about us that breeds some of the most shocking kind of ignorance as South Africans. About the world around us, one, but more so about the very continent on which we exist. We're simply clueless about the developments on the continent, or what happens around us on the continent. And quite frankly, I think we don't care to know because we can afford not to know currently. And perhaps the last thing for now, in wrapping up in my 3 minutes, is for me the post-colonial political economy. And here, perhaps borrowing from a Fanonian lens, which speaks to a lack of imagination in constructing a post-colonial political economy, which is conducive for broad-based and inclusive development needs of a so-called post-federation society. So whilst it may be argued that competition for scarce resources, etc., could be a driver of Afrophobia, I think it's useful to think about why this is the case. And I think it's quite pertinent to bring into focus this what has happened in this post-colonial political economy. So I think if we are going to combat Afrophobia or xenophobia with any degree of success, we're going to have to start dismantling and addressing some of these things head on, which I feel just hasn't happened in the South African context. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Can you expand on your first point? I can donate 30 seconds of my time to you. I didn't understand what you meant by that. Your first point of wholesome living, something like that.
Oh yeah. So I think township spaces are horrible spaces. Like, I don't like the township. I grew up in the township, but I don't like the township. I think townships lend themselves to a whole lot of things that we deem to be socially regressive. The highest crime rates, township homicide rates, township poverty, we find it all in the township. And townships are particularly very violent spaces. And that's what I'm appealing to. That, you know, even take foreign nationals even out of the equation. Townships are just not spaces that are conducive to also development. So, and I think that's it just adds fuel to the fire. Yeah.
Can I just, because I've been told that people on social media can't see the speaker, so is it possible for the speakers to stand up when they are speaking? Please. Okay. If you're not stand here, you can.
So, good evening, everyone. As I was so very dramatically introduced, my name is Joyce Bongongo, and I've been a part of the Saya family for quite some time, I think for a very long period of my secondary school career at least. To give you some background on me, I was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and I've spent a majority of my life here in South Africa. So I've got, so I think Sophie and I are two examples of people that have gotten to live on either sides of this discussion, if you want to put it that way. And to be honest, if you had asked me to come to a meeting like this to speak on solutions to Afrophobia a year ago, I promise you I would have stood here and spent 95% of my time giving you explicit details of different examples of the different times myself or different people I've met have experienced or felt Afrophobia directed towards them. But it's been a year and I've learned a lot. A person can learn a lot in a year, and it had a lot to do with the fact that I was privileged enough to be part of the Youth at Saya team that's actually part of a project in partnership with UNICEF. We're putting together what we're going to be calling the Youth Advocacy Guide. And this is essentially going to be a guide created by young people from across the continent to help direct other young people and navigate them throughout their different experiences of advocacy in their different spaces, regardless of what they're passionate about, regardless of what topic they really feel needs to be addressed in their community or society. This guide is supposed to be that open conversation that first glance into what you can do to be able to take that first step towards change in whatever context you find yourself in across Africa. So it's incredibly exciting, but the reason why I bring this up, apart from the fact that everyone should watch the space for the Youth Advocacy Guide, the idea is that I've learned and I've gotten the privilege to meet so many different people. I've learned the importance of perspective. I've learned the incredible importance of perspective. I've gotten the privilege to travel to different countries. I've had to be an informal translator where I found myself literally in the middle of two different viewpoints and having to translate one understanding into another, having to kind of bring one meaning of something into another. And I've realized the importance of taking a step back and trying to understand another person's point of view. And with that, I'm going to be talking about the importance of, how can I put this? As real as the different experiences I've lived through are, I've realized that it's incredibly important to understand what's being asked of you. It's incredibly important to understand what's being expressed by the other party, by the other side, and so that's where a lot of what I'm going to say stems from today. I've learned the importance of language, and I've seen how powerful a tool language can be in different contexts and how big of a barrier it can be in different contexts. I'll give you examples of how the fact that it became a barrier created fear.
there was someone incredibly close to me, and this is a sad statistic because I feel like as I'm about to say this, a lot of people in this room are going to have similar experiences. Someone I know very close to me almost got mugged on the street. And it was a traumatic experience, and thank goodness they're okay today. But something that they said when retelling their story that rang true in my mind is the fact that they were surrounded by 3 people. And it was an individual surrounded by 3 people. And these 3 people were yelling and screaming different things at them, they were giving him different instructions, they were telling him to do different things, and he didn't understand a word. I think there's something telling about just that idea. The fear of not being able to understand what's being expressed to you is incredibly powerful, and people tend to forget this. There have been several other stories, and people tend to think that it's just about, it's an unfortunate situation that foreign nationals find themselves in vulnerable situations, but we don't realize that this happens everywhere. I'm not sure how familiar a lot of you are. I'm sorry, I keep looking down. I have to remember everything that I meant to say today. But I'm not sure how familiar a lot of you are. About a few years ago, a new municipality was established in the Vuane region in Limpopo. And among other issues, tensions between surrounding communities were cited as a reason. There were reports of people being kicked out of taxis because they spoke a different language. Now, mind you, these are people in different communities, both South African, both Black communities, having these same issues. So it comes to show the importance of addressing the issue of language barriers and being able to see different perspectives. We forget just how powerful this tool is. And many different governing bodies and structures have also recognized this power. I mean, I'll cite the Department of Basic Education because some of us tend to not want to admit, a lot of what our convictions are today as adults stem from different experiences and different things that we've allowed to influence us during the years of our basic education, regardless of how you receive your basic education, regardless of where. And so there is a deeper need to place a huge concern on what we allow or what we are disallowing young people to be influenced by in those early years, because that is what's going to influence the way they think later on in life. And so I started the Department of Basic Education because I came across an announcement that in 2020 the language of Kiswahili is going to be introduced as a secondary additional language here in South Africa. I thought that was interesting at first. I thought that was peculiar, exciting at first. And then I realized, okay, no, there were several reasons that made complete sense as to why they did this. It's one of the most spoken languages in Africa, whether some of us know it or not. It's it's a trading language in Africa. It has a lot of use as to why young South Africans should know this language, and it was cited as something to create African cohesion, more African cohesion. And I commend our governments for trying new things, but at the same time, we need to cite the realities. If we think about the fact that you are someone working in international relations, or you are someone with different businesses in different countries that speak Kiswahili, it makes complete sense. But to be honest, if a friend of mine born, bred, raised in Sosha that really just wants good service delivery and really just wants to be able to communicate that to his local government, has to study for his spelling test of Kiswahili tomorrow, it doesn't seem so adamant or so relevant today, or to that person in that specific context. So it just speaks to the fact that a lot of effort goes into speaking. I'm so sorry. What I'm trying to say is, the fact is that the reason why it seems so distant, so irrelevant in that specific context is because if something isn't your mother tongue, and you need effort to speak that language, you start to wonder why. Why do I need to specifically speak to that person? Why do I need to know that person? And it's because, as was nicely pointed out in the beginning of this talk, the fact that we as Africans don't know each other's stories. We as Africans don't know each other's histories. We don't know each other's struggles. We don't know the fact that we are so similar in so many different ways. And once we start addressing those issues, underrooting the issues of what is in our history syllabus, why, the fact that we spend so much time learning about Europe and World War II and the Cold War and all these different things, but when I was matric, the 53 other countries that share the same continent as the history class I was in were crammed into 2 chapters of a textbook as self-study, because everybody does self-study in the matric. So, as a closing to my opening, I'd like us to hopefully today address the ideas of what needs to be put in place in basic education. What needs to be, how young people can be used not only in basic education, but in their communities to bring what they learn in these new syllabi or basic education to their communities, to create platforms where people can discuss, share, and talk about their different experiences so we can see each other's perspectives. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sophie Ganza from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm a peace activist, and I have dedicated my life to Afrophobia awareness. So, when I hear that Afrophobia and xenophobia could be interchangeable, I find it quite insulting because of all the experiences that I have been through and how I have seen Afrophobia in action. And I shine a light especially bright on institutionalized Afrophobia, because yes, we do experience it on a communal level, but the institutionalized Afrophobia knows no bounds. Even in refugee reception offices, we see it. You don't see Chinese people in the line, you don't see Pakistanis in the line, but you see them leaving. You see them skipping the lines. I've never been to a refugee reception office and seen someone from Yemen or I don't know, any other non-Black refugee. Doesn't mean they're not here. It doesn't mean that they can just navigate the spaces without papers better than we can. If you walk in the CBD, Johannesburg CBD, there's a task force, community task force, that walks around harassing people that don't look South African for papers. And those are Black people. I mean, how many white people have you seen walking around the CBD? So it's Afrophobia, and we need to call it what it is. Refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants are the ones that go into township spaces, are the ones that share the buses with you, are the ones that share the taxis with you. So we are the ones that you see every day. You don't see the Swedish people running multi-million rand companies, but we are the threats, they're not the threats. So I think it's very important to distinguish the two. I speak from personal experience, so you'll hear I a lot, but there's no I in team, true, but my personal experience makes me very qualified to speak on the issues when it comes to Afrophobia. And the denial in this country is what is keeping us from moving forward and from tackling the problem head on. It's always minimalized to criminality, or no, it was not Afrophobia, it was a service delivery protest. But we find that whenever there's a service delivery protest in your area, as a migrant, I start getting texts like, stay home, don't leave. These protests are eventually going to spill out into us being attacked. And I've been here since I was 3. So I don't know how far your memory can go back, but mine is probably to when I was 3 or 4. And this is the only place I've known. So it's
it's ludicrous that I have to stand here and talk about this. And yeah, I really hope that these kind of conversations and actual policy change can put me out of a job. Thanks.
So I'm wondering if people asked to stand up because I know social media likes to see what dress I'm wearing all the time. I had that at a conference recently. But I'll say Muli Bwanji. For those of you who know, Muli Bwanji means hello from the warm heart of Malawi. Bonsoir, as you would say in Congo, Brazzaville, or hola, or sawubona. And that's really the essence of Africa. But before I get into that, I think my intervention will be personal, but I'd like it to cause some self-reflection and shed light on the situation we're facing in South Africa right now. Just shout out, if someone asks you to identify yourself, just one word, how do you identify yourself? Just put up your hand and shout out a word. Anyone?
African.
African? Anyone else? Yeah. Anyone else? Congolese? One more, come on. I haven't had a female voice yet. Say that louder. South African. So I think the situation we're dealing with, and I was reading the South African plan, or the government plan, it's called the South African National Plan Against Xenophobia and Racism, which recently was released. And it touched on something very important, but I think which we realize with the topic of today's discussion, Afrophobia, is that it's in South Africa, race and identity is very interlinked. And I'm going to touch on my own experience and how I have come to be defined as African now, but how I was never defined as African. So colonial powers designated races, and they did this so that they had a workforce. It's one sociological theory, you can agree or disagree, but it's the argument I'll hold today, right? We then get into an apartheid system, which then designates races or race because they want to oppress or reap the benefits or economic benefits. And so society then adopts this. And I was defined as Indian. I grew up in an area because of colonial structures, apartheid structures, called an Indian area, my whole life being told I'm Indian, right? Society attributed that role to me. Indian South African. I thought nothing more than that. And then my colleagues talked about education. And I took sociology as part of my medical degree as well. And I learned that actually, race is a social construct. Am I really Indian? And I started questioning all of this. I then went on to wearing some African dresses, finding my identity, etc., etc. And now I identify myself as African. It's been a long process. And it's been a process where society has given me a certain box. And society continues to classify me. But that is not the classification that I identify with. And I think many of you in the room would or wouldn't understand. Sometimes we say we're South African, right? But what exactly does that mean? I was at a conference in Morocco, and I love transitioning between identities. Because I look a little bit Egyptian, I wore a Moroccan dress, and then you sound South African. The only thing people were thinking is, where exactly does she come from? Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks ago, I got to travel with, and I brought this as a bit of a show and tell, right? So you can see it does exist. The African Union does exist in some way. 2 weeks ago, I got my African Union passport, right? And I am an African. Don't be confused by this. This is maybe my verification, I guess. But anyways, it's the first time I went to the airport with this passport. And I realized when the person at the immigration office said, well, sorry, what nationality are you? This is an African passport. And I said, what do you mean? I'm African. And she said, no, but where do you come from? And so people are still demanding to make you South African, even though you are African. You identify as African, you say you're African. I'll give you another example. On social media, I posted a dress of mine and I said, African Green, I am an African. And colleagues from Ghana said, or Kenya said, but how can you be African if you look that way? When you've traveled most of the continent, you get to see that Africa is so diverse. The point I'm trying to make is that this passport, it should not be privileged for people who work in the AU. It should be for every single person on the continent. That is when we will start to transition and become and identify as young people, as old people, as African. There's someone sitting in the audience frowning at me. I hope I'm making some sense. But the point I'm starting to make is that the world is so diverse. The boxes we classify in, or we classify others in, are really structurally defined by people who are dead millions and generations of years ago, and which we continue to perpetuate. And when we perpetuate this hatred, and it's hatred, it's Afrophobia and it's hatred. I do think we have xenophobia in South Africa, but I think our concern right now is Afrophobia. When we do that, we're dealing with a South African mindset that is tailored to race. In South Africa, everything is tailored to race. I remember doing a study while here at Wits University with visually impaired people on race. And it was interesting, people who could never see in their life, from an accent, they could tell what race someone was. It's really, really interesting of how ingrained this is in our society. So I'll end up there saying, our identity and the reflection of how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive others, oh, the crowd's coming again, how we perceive others is so critical. When we're hating people, we're hating them on what basis? That they come from another African country? What is that? We need to challenge this right out. I'll end up with my horrible South African French accent. L'Afrique est mon pays. Africa is my home.
Yeah, a lot has been said. Very nice stuff. My dear friends, something just that passed through my mind as the panelists were delivering intellectual speeches here is the fact that, you know, this week I met with Jean-Pierre Misago, a lecturer at the African Center for Migration and Society here at Wits. We're busy discussing my independent research essay that I'm writing on, which is Afrophobia in the law, how the South African judiciary is responding to cases of Afrophobia. So in essence, I'm trying to look at what the courts have done, where Afrophobia might have played a role in, and trying to see the jurisprudence of the courts, either the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Constitutional Court, or the High Courts. And one thing he said to me was, there's a difference when we speak of Afrophobia. There's Afrophobia as a feeling, and there's Afrophobia as an expression. A feeling can be a resentment towards somebody from Africa, and an expression can be going to that person and saying, you know what, I hate you, and at night you go burn his place, or, you know, do something bad to him as a result of hating him. And that got me thinking. And that got me thinking also about whether in this continent of ours, is it time that we do away with things like SADC and ECOWAS and other regional organizations, probably in the east of Africa and so on and so forth? Because then it might play a role in that we see SADC, us in SADC, we see it's us versus them. You understand? It's us versus them. It's us here in Southern Africa versus them. We have seen the African Union elections when they take place for the chairperson, how they tend to be, it's Francophone versus Anglophone, it's SADC versus ECOWAS for them to vote in an African Union chairperson. And we know how Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma went through the pain and how many rounds she had to go through to win her elections as an African Union chairperson. But without further ado, let me ask the first question, and I think I'll start with my brother here to ask. South Africa is often perceived as being separate from the rest of Africa. What can be done to change that perception? Just before you start, I remember in Stellenbosch there's one lecturer who said, in Africa, these things happen. And I was really shocked, and I said to myself, did she not just hear herself? What is, you know? So I want you, my brother, to answer that question of, you know, in South Africa, we are often perceived as being separate from the rest of Africa. What can be done to change the perception?
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, I think you hit the nail on the head, you know. And when I started speaking, I spoke about our generally parochial disposition in South Africa, how we tend to think of ourselves as, well, we can be quite insular. And just like the example you give now, where you find, you know, an average South African person speaking, talking about the continent and saying they're in Africa as if we're not an African continent. It's very strange. And I think, as I think the panel has also touched on, I think it speaks to, on the one hand, and not to justify it. It speaks to the kind of history that South Africa has gone through, and the sort of stance that South Africa adopted in relation to the continent from at least 1948 up until 1994. Where it was very much an us versus them because of the apartheid and the apartheid history. But what happened after '94 is that there's been no deliberate attempts, at least from where I stand, to dismantle the miseducation about the continent and about who we are in relation to the continent. So I think a key component, as has been touched on here, is the education. I had the privilege to work with people from all over the continent over my career. And I remember speaking to a Kenyan colleague who was so well versed in South African history. And I was curious about this. I was like, how do you know all of these things about South Africa? And she said, throughout her primary and high school, in the history lessons, they learned about South Africa. You know, there was a concerted effort to teach them about the entire continent, and part of that education, South Africa was featured. And even speaking to colleagues and friends from Nigeria, who will tell you that the Nigerian government at some point in its support for the anti-apartheid movement actually issued a levy or a tax on public servants in Nigeria. And that money was ring-fenced to go and support the ANC and anti-apartheid activity. So I think what's missing is quite a deliberate attempt to situate South Africa on the African continent and to situate South Africa's identity as being African on the African continent. And I think something needs to be done, and I'm heartened by such platforms and efforts and initiatives like Africa Matters. And it says to me that, you know, something is going to happen. Yeah, thanks.
Just to touch on that, I know, because I'm guilty of doing this often too, that when identifying a problem, it's very easy to allude to the fact that certain government structures or certain superior powers haven't done anything in relation to these issues, and they have. It's not that they are blind to these issues that are quite prevalent in our societies. I talk about the Department of Basic Education a lot. They moved towards putting history as a compulsory subject, again, in basic education. But the issue with this is that, on top of that, they're trying to make it more Afrocentric, to try and make education more Afrocentric in general. But the problem that I identified with this issue is that in all the discussions, well, at least those that I've managed to listen in on, these make education more Afrocentric approaches or more towards improving the identity of a young South African in terms of what they know about their South African heritage. And as much as that is incredibly important, we need to know our African heritage from different parts of the continent pre-colonial days. We need to know exactly where and how things work. The problem is that there's a fear that that's where it will end in terms of the heading of African history in education. So to answer your question, I think it's actually quite prevalent that South Africa is seen as a bit separate to Africa, but I don't think it's a problem that can't be solved. That's what I'm trying to say. That different things are being tried, different things are being attempted to. I think it's just the way we go about it and the way we, as people in such platforms, actually engage with these existing ideas that are being put forth that are going to bring forth substantial change.
Okay, my sister Joyce. Yeah, I was supposed to ask you a specific question for you, but thank you. Let me just try to ask you this, because you mentioned the education system. I heard the term education system. Currently, we are celebrating African Month, right? And there are some universities that are very quiet on events that are supposed to take place. I'm not saying they should take place every week or every day, but at least a celebration once. I see University of Pretoria as its own event happening at Gibbs, or I think somewhere with their vice chancellor and everything. And it's not all the 26 universities that I see are hosting something. Probably I'm ignorant, but I was going through some university tabs to see what are happening in their events. Especially also here, I checked, and I see nothing at home here. So I don't know, maybe they added something. But my question to you is, and please just short, do you think universities can play a role in educating their scholars and people outside about the importance of unity amongst Africans? Very short.
Very short, I really do. I really do, because universities are institutions of thought. The main premise of universities is the fact that people can come together and share ideas and share perspectives. So I think that universities can play a huge role. I just think that they can do more than, as you've mentioned, they've done so far.
All right. My sister Sophie, you lead a youth organization foundation that you created. What do you think is our role as the youth of this country and continent in eradicating Afrophobia in areas of our community specifically? Should I repeat?
No. Firstly, I'd just like to comment that one thing we fail to mention is that universities are places of privilege. It's very tough to get into these places. It's very tough to get into these spaces. If you're an asylum seeker, you have to pay 80% upfront. So yeah. So maybe getting the university out of here and into, people that are not woke and need to hear these conversations. But to my actual question, we're seeing a lot of creativity amongst the youth. So I think using these creative talents to tell stories, to tell real African stories, stories of migration, stories of separation, stories of hurt, institutionalized Afrophobia. I know they don't let any cameras or whatever into reception offices, but youth will find a way. So I think those are pictures we need to see. Those are stories we need to hear. I always advocate for mass media. Why are we not seeing refugee stories on SABC1? Why are we not seeing migration stories on SABC1? When I was growing up, I don't know how many people watched Soul Buddies, but Okay, so we're all old here.
So on Soul Buddies, there was a refugee family, and it was played by actual refugees. And a lot of us who watched it got an insight into the plight of refugees and what they go through, and being in their lives. And watching Soul Buddies really helped a lot of people to understand me and where I was from. And even though at the time I didn't really speak about my issues, people will come up to me and be like, "Are you going through what XYZ is going through on Soul Buddies?" And then fast forward to a few years on Rhythm City, there was a Congolese doctor who had come and he didn't have papers and he was mopping the floor or whatever. But then it was played by a South African. And he had a horrible Nigerian accent. And then when he got married to a South African lady, they dressed in Nigerian regalia. So there isn't a shortage of Congolese creatives in this country. Why are they not being at least on a consultative basis? It just makes us way more confused than we already are. So I think using creative talents to tell stories would be number one. Number two, having more migrants like myself that are willing to go onto platforms and speak. I do respect that a lot of migrants are, they're scared for their safety. They don't want to share their stories. They don't want to share the human rights abuses that they've been through. But putting a face to the things we go through makes it more real. And having a lot of local allies that are not scared to stand up for us in public spaces, that are not keeping quiet when the taxi driver doesn't want to help us, or refuses to speak in English, and then I see you getting off at Vets, but you weren't willing to help me when I didn't know the directions. People that are not scared to stand up for injustice.
Okay, thank you. And let me just, you just reminded me one thing, my sister Sophie. I remember when I sat in the institutional forum at Stellenbosch University, I put forward an agenda stating and asking the institutional forum to call upon the director for international office and asking him why other students, African students, were paying double fees at the university. So they were shocked, in fact, those members, because the institutional forum has different members, the alumni and everything. They called upon the director for the international office and they asked him to state why other African students were paying double fees and upfront. And I saw him trembling there because I was sitting by so it was a boardroom, I was sitting by the side and I saw him, he was speaking down the podium, he was busy trembling and saying, no, SADC students, he gave his reasons. And if you do know that, just to let you know that SADC students pay the same fees as South African students, but the only difference is the registration fees. But they have to still pay upfront. Students from outside SADC, the Southern African Development Community, outside of those 15 countries or 16, because now SADC is even trying, other countries are coming, such as Comoros, I think, and trying to apply to be part of the region. Other countries such as Nigeria and that out of SADC pay double fees to the university upfront. At least 75% if I'm still sure. 75% should be paid upfront and the other should be finished in March. So does this also not play a role in how universities are Afrophobic as institutions, saying it's us versus them? Yes, I understand it might be a policy between SADC that our students, just like in the European Union, but if certain mini-regional bodies in the continent are saying it's us versus them, then it's problematic, because then it starts playing around, and people start saying, oh, SADC, we are together, these people are not Africans. And so such things like that. So in his speech, you're telling the university, no, the policies that SADC has instructed us that it should be like this for SADC people and the rest of the African continent. people should pay double fees. Now, my question is, surely the African Union should play a role in this and not let many regional bodies decide what should happen amongst the continent. So, and when the doctor was speaking here, I just realized that there is also a problem between sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa. There are instances where North Africa says we are not African. We are not Africans. And there are instances when people from sub-Saharan Africa say, we do not know those people, they're not Africans. Those ones, the real Africans are us. We're in Egypt. So I think as a diverse continent, and just to let you guys think so that you can ask the audience a few questions before we close, just to understand that maybe it's time that we as Africans start asking difficult questions about who we are and where are we going. Because it cannot be that many years later after the Organization of African Union was established, we are still fighting amongst each other and not considering now about economic development and so on and so forth. I mean, it's very difficult for an African to travel in Africa. There was a statistic by BBC that says a British can travel from Cairo to Cape Town and he's going to stop only at one border post where they are going to ask him about his visa. But you as an African start today, take your car, you go. Okay, it's fine, you go South Africa, you go Zimbabwe, no, it's Commonwealth, okay, no, it's still SADC. Even in SADC, there's still visa restrictions between Congo, South Africa, and other countries. But other African countries can tell a Russian, no, you can come here for free. Just take your plane and come in, we'll give you a visa on arrival. But in African, you are going to be told, hey, man, where are you going? No. Sit here. You know, but a British person, when he's going to pass, they'll say, no, how are you, sir? Okay, let's even show you the way out here. They take him out, you know, they say, and show him, no, you can continue this way. So such things, I think, play also a role in you know, fueling Afrophobia, because then we say to each other, no, a British can come in, a French can come in, but go to Europe yourself. Enjoy to do that. They'll say, why are you going? No. You should have applied for a visa in your country. You want to go to Belgium now? No. Go first to your country and apply. And it happened to me, you know, the way I was treated. I told myself there was a time I was going to Malaysia in 2015, invited by the University of Nottingham. And I reached in Dubai, they took my passport. He said, okay, you wait. I said, no. I have the freedom. Why do you need me to wait? There was a long line. And I said, no, I want to go into my plane. They said, no. This is not your country. There's no freedom of speech here. I said, I have a lawyer. He said, yes, it's fine. Then they called police. They're in Dubai. That's when I kept quiet, because when those police came, they told me to step aside. And I told myself, you know what? This is fine if it happens to me outside. But in my own continent, it feels pain when you're stopped around and told to wait to this side. I once traveled to the Congo, and as I was entering the border there between Kasumbalesa, Zambia, I see the soldier there sitting just to the gun. I could not speak anymore. I just went just doing this to the gun, and I said, oh yeah. Yeah, so probably they thought, no, this is a rebel coming in, or it's coming to invade our country. But I mean, if there was somebody from Britain, they're going to say, oh, no, enter here and everything. So so that is it. Just to move to you, doctor. I see you have an African Union passport there, an African passport. That's very great. We have been hearing about that on the news, and they said they were going to extend it first to diplomats, heads of states, and so on and so forth. But it is really taking long for them to give it to the citizens of the continent. And my question to you is this. Don't you think that it is time that the African Union tries to play, how am I going to put it? Because right now they're dominant, let's be honest. Countries such as Ghana are the only ones, a few countries, about 6 or 8, Ghana, I think Madagascar, Mauritius, are the only ones who have implemented visa on arrival for Africans. Meaning that you can take a plane now, go to Ghana, arrive there in Accra, and they'll give you a visa on arrival. There are only few countries not waiting for the African Union to do this. Some countries are citing security issues. But I believe now with the usage of biometric passports, it's becoming easy for people to be traced, and security should become it should become less of a concern, and we should try to look at economic integration, because I think the problem is the restriction of Africans moving, because Africans cannot collaborate amongst each other for economic development, and therefore that's restricting the continent. So my question to you, since you play a role and you sit on an advisory council in the African Union, is it not time that the African Union plays an important role in making sure that these passports are released early to member states? Because I remember they said, and I stand to be corrected, they said they will leave it to African countries, each African country to decide. That's problematic. You give Africans something, they will sit on it. No one is going to discuss that issue. So is it not time that the African Union chairperson talks to the African Union president and they try to accelerate this?
Okay, so I keep waiting to get fired from the AU since November. Definitely, you're on point. Just to give a few quick facts, right? The African Union, who of you in the room, by show of hands, know the African Youth Charter? Okay, quite a few, but not enough of you. Now that's a point I'm going to try and make. You made the comment that the African Union is dormant, right? If you were going to say that at someone at the AU, they say, no, we're very busy, we're meeting all day, we're flying permissions, we're doing things, right? So I think it's about the roles and how we then create the advocacy. So the AU is a continental body. It comes up with policies and frameworks and charters and legislations. But where's the problem? The problem is that they do all of that, and then us as citizens are sitting down here, and there's no translation between what's happening up there, what our governments are promising and committing to, and what we are aware of. So when I first joined the AU, and I'm not a subject matter expert, I started reading the different policies. I read the African Youth Charter was developed in 2006. Our governments committed to free movement. Our governments, so the visas, the free movement, to education on levels that are equal across the continent, to all of these different things, to a budgetary allocation for youth as well. If you go and read the AU Youth Charter, it's now 2018. How much of that has been achieved? Who's monitoring that? So I think the AU, yes, they do the policy, they do the legislation, but it's up to us as young people or people sitting in this room to begin to advocate. I already heard issues to begin advocating on. The one is that African students should not be paying double fees when they come to South African universities. The other one is we touched on the work issues, right? And I was having this conversation with someone from a UN agency last week who was saying, you know, when people come from Europe, they can easily come and do an exchange program in Africa. Very easily, no barriers. The reason I joined the AU Council is because I was sitting with a young person in Ghana complaining about the AU, and he said to me, Shakira, please apply. I'm sure you stand a chance. Someone's got to do something about this. I have the money, I have the resources, I have everything. I've got offered a job, I think it was Benin or one of those other countries. And he says, but they're refusing to give me a work permit. If it was someone from Germany, he'd have that work permit. So what I'm trying to argue is that it's our responsibility as well as young people sitting in the room, as Africans sitting here, to say the AU is coming up with all these commitments and charters, and you should go to their website and start reading them, right? Our governments are committing to that, but they are not delivering on any of that. Our election just went in South Africa. Which party talked about the African Youth Charter? The other initiative, and I'm willing to just quickly tell the room about, is the African Union launched a 1 million by 2021 on 4 fronts: education, employment, entrepreneurship, and there's one more. But anyways, on 4 fronts, right? And now they've launched it. It's up to us to keep monitoring that and say, is it achievable? Why are you only targeting 1 million youth? How do we reach 5, 6 million youth? Africa has a massive youth population. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a gap that we need to fill, right? And I think that's critical. two interesting and funny facts about the African Union passport. When I went to Brazzaville, I still had to get a visa, so it doesn't work everywhere. And also, it only works within the African Union. If you have a UN passport, you can actually fly anywhere in the world, Canada, the US, whatever. But with the AU passport, only within Africa. So I think that as a continent, we need to start reflecting. We need to start pushing action, each and every one of us. We can't expect it to be done by others who are writing policies and putting it in their desk and saying the job is done.
Thank you, Doctor, for that. Yeah, I hope the African Union will accelerate it. You're our representative there, and I hope you convey to them the feelings that we have towards this issue. Just to say something I said before I open it to the public, is that we do indeed have a Pan-African Youth Union. And I don't understand what their role is. Because the only thing I see the president doing, in fact the former president, is just moving around. And I don't see any tangible things that are being said about the youth or issues of Afrophobia. And this is really not surprising because our regional bodies, honestly, and we need to be honest with ourselves, they are not doing anything. They are not serving us as citizens of the African continent. And something needs to be done. And I think it's our role as youths to take the pattern of leadership and, and try to revive our regional bodies. Let me ask you to help me with the mic, because then I'll open it to the floor to ask questions. So what I'll do is there'll be 3 rounds of questions in each round about okay. 4 hands. Please, okay. Please be short.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Iriti Maleng, and I'll be taking questions. How many questions do you have?
4 in each round.
4 in each round?
Yeah.
Okay, round 1. Okay, noted. Round 1. Round 1. Round 1. Round 1. Okay, so you have 4 people in round 1. Okay, round 2.
No, let's deal with round 1 first.
Okay.
Please just give them the mic.
Okay. Hi, thanks so much for the discussion, guys. I have 2 questions actually, so I hope it doesn't take away from one person. One question is particularly for Joyce. At the beginning of your discussion, you spoke about language barriers, and one of the things I'm interested to understand is, in the context of xenophobia, what do you mean with regards to language barriers? And I ask simply out of the fear that you're saying language barriers are a reason that we could justify xenophobia, right? And that's almost as if we're pushing the blame onto the person that doesn't know the language. So it would be great just to get context for clarity's sake. And my second question is for anyone on the panel who would like to answer. Shakira, you started your conversation talking about apartheid structures, which South Africa's apartheid structures. It would be great to hear from everyone on the panel how you see the internalization of apartheid structures feeding into what we're seeing today as Afrophobia. Thanks.
I think you should either answer first, or you may take more questions.
No, let them answer first. Then. Okay, just.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lenin Munyai. I'm a former student here at VETS, and I work for the African Union too. I wanted to ask my sister if she could perhaps explain the role that Aya Chebi, she's the new special envoy for youth. What's her role, and what is it that young Africans from all African countries can do to interact with her in fulfilling the 1 billion by 2021? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Justice, as I said. So, I have, okay. I have a question slash comment, and I'd like to challenge the audience also. So, directed to my brother there. Sorry for that remembering. So, I agree with my sister here that there's a difference between xenophobia and Afrophobia. Why? Because Afrophobia is something that it can be hidden. And also, you can be a signatory of Afrophobia and people won't know, unless if you become xenophobic. Do you understand that? So most of us here are Afrophobic, but we don't know it. We are subconsciously Afrophobic, and then when someone does something wrong but becomes xenophobic and people can see it, that's when we say that they're xenophobic, they are wrong. So my brother then made a comment that townships are not okay, they're messy, you know. So that thing on its own is Afrophobia. Yeah. Sometimes you might know, that's why I'm saying we take it as something that is hypothetical and abstract. We live with it. You may be Afrophobic, but you don't know it. And then you think you're better because you're not xenophobic. We understand each other. So the distinction might be somewhat blurry, but it's there and it's very serious. So this thing goes back to us also as students. We are students, okay. Let me just say intellect. It goes back to us. What are we doing? What are we doing for our country? We tend to think, okay, you know what? Because I live in the suburbs, I can say anything about township, and those are others. It's hypothetical also. It goes back to what? Othering, how you look at the other person. You know, the very same thing is also climbing up in politics. Even if you can have young black people running in politics, we still have the same problem because othering has been invaded in us. How do you defeat othering? So there is a practice with politicians. We know that politicians, all of them, they say they're serving the public, but they live in suburbs. So how do you serve people of which you look at them as savage? Politicians also, they're Afrophobic, but they're not xenophobic. How will they revoke xenophobia if they're also Afrophobic in themselves? Thank you.
The Zabi Geo, okay. I'll try to Google some Swahili. To be okay. Yes.
You did well. I'm married. You guys.
I will get there. So mine is a simple submission. My name is Hobozo, by the way. I'm quite frequent most of the time in Kenton Park and parts of Madrid, especially in those smaller and complex around borders and stuff. So one thing I've noticed there is that we find out our brothers, mostly from Zambia and Zimbabwe and Malawi, are most engaged with them and encounter them there. And mostly are working for Asians, Chinese mostly. And I think most of them, they don't usually engage or rather collaborate with us in respect of issues that pertain to labor issues and stuff like that because of work permits. We found out a work permit allowed them to be in South Africa as long as they work. And then you'll be exploited and be paid 1,000 rand, 1.5 per month for working from 6 to 9 p.m. And they will work, but they will be unable to join us when we are fighting this labor slavery, the modern day labor slavery, because they are threatening that if you join these people or if you protest, we will fire you, and if you are fired, you'll be sent back or be deported to Mandela, and Mandela and stay there, or be deported to country, and they're scared because of those dynamics. So what I'm submitting is, as the AU, in respect of its jurisdictions in Africa, what is their impact or their contribution in respect of reforming this in refugees or immigration, whatever laws that are regulating this, citizen visa and whatever they allow and work permit and all this stuff, in order to ensure that our people are not exploited by virtue of them fearing to be deported if they are raising their concern or whether they are when they're cooperating with the local South Africans and stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. I think the guests may start to answer the questions.
Anyone can start.
Hi. Hi. Okay. To address that question, okay. Someone's telling me to speak louder. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, okay, no, that's fine. No, just to address that question, by no means was I implying that barrier in language is some sort of excuse for Afrophobic or xenophobic behavior or attacks. I was using it simply as a means for people to see a tangible way that we need to learn from each other's perspectives. In the same way that when people don't know each other's languages or mother tongues, it takes effort to try and understand where another person is coming from. In the same way, for example, some of the community programs that Sophie runs take effort. It's not something that comes natural in the same way as, for example, your mother tongue. Someone speaking to you in your mother tongue, something that you immediately understand, you immediately know of. I was just using it as almost as an imagery for people to understand the idea that we need to put in effort to learn from each other's perspectives.
I'd like to respond to the gentleman, I forgot your name, but I really like the way you see it, and you spoke of what I call in the closet Afrophobes, that being a migrant, I share spaces, and I hear things like, but you're not like them. How do you speak so well? Congolese people don't speak like that. That's being Afrophobic, but not xenophobic, as you mentioned it. And in arguments, you'll hear them say, yeah, but you guys, you people, those type of things. And even in the South African context, there's tribalism, there's a part of issues that South Africans face on their own, and then we come and with the additional extra, and it's somehow used to justify. I was speaking at another summit earlier, and so many people stood up and said, but even when I go to Limpopo as a Xhosa, I feel like I'm not home, So yeah, it's really about what are we doing to face those issues. And one of the things I run is called Afrophobia Conversations, which is a safe space for migrants and locals to come into a space where they're able to share the different issues they face in their communities. I know a lot of people are thinking this, but they don't want to say it, but migrants do tend to congregate amongst themselves and block themselves off from their communities, whether it's out of fear, out of laziness, out of superiority, whatever the reasons are, we are doing that. So we want to get those people out of those comfort zones, which are false sense of security, to be honest, and into the communities and discuss issues that they face and how we can move together as communities. Because as we stand, there is not one Afrophobia awareness campaign. Not one, except mine. Not one by Department of Social Development, by Home Affairs, DIRCO, not one. Not one. So that's why we have to have these conversations. And we need to go into the communities that need it. Because I'm tired of preaching to the converted. And that's what we keep doing. As activists, we keep doing this. And you know, I was saying to my fiance that I went to a talk in Soweto, and this girl stood up like a bat out of hell and said, "You people must learn our language. If you people don't want to learn our language, then we don't want you here. You are arrogant, blah, 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 blah." And while she was saying that, I smiled. And people came up to me afterwards and said, "I'm so sorry she said that." And I was like, don't be sorry. That's the person we need to be here. Because if everyone here is sympathizing with me, then I'm wasting my time. We need people like that in our spaces, to come into our spaces, to spend time with me and see that I'm human. Because that's the bottom line. So, yeah. These conversations are necessary in the right spaces where there are actual Afrophobes and that are loud and proud.
Okay, so I know I've spoken a lot this evening. I won't go into too much of detail. There was a question about the African Union, right? And I'm pretty new there as well, 5 months into the job. I think that when we're thinking of efforts, and what I'm starting to realize as well, because I'm not a political animal, so I'm starting to learn the structures too, is one, your member state, your country is the most important level of action, right? If you want to advocate for anything. Then it's the region, and then it's the African Union. But I would say that we should target all 3 levels. I don't think we should stop at just one or either level, to your question right at the back. And this year is the AU theme of the year is migration, refugees, and internally displaced persons. And I don't know how many people know that, but that's the year to go and put your advocacy issues right square on the agenda. And it's such a pity, I think, that these sort of things are not popularized enough, that we don't know about it. Because if we knew about it, we could start to put it on the agenda. And that's our job as young people in the AU, to try and bring it closer to all of you. There was a question on the envoy of youth. So it's taken, someone made this amazing comment a few weeks ago when we were at Edis. They said it's taken the African Union over 50 years to have a special envoy on youth. So the way the structure works is you've got the envoy, and each of us are in different regions of the continent as an advisory council and as a representative to all of you. So reach out at any time, and we will try and get your issues known. What I would say, and I give full disclosure on that, is they created the role to be more as an advocacy advisory role and not an implementation role. The implementation role for this issue is the Peace and Security Division of the AU, which we now start to bridge the gap between all of you and the AU. We've got a council member who actually liaises with them. I really like the person who talked about Afrophobia and xenophobia, and I think when I started off the discussion and asked, how do each of you classify yourself? And I think that's where we start. Each of us need to look within ourselves and try really hard, challenge yourself when you're meeting someone. Rather wait for them to explain who they are than you assigning your ideas and your oppressions and your hatred on someone. And I think that's where it all starts with us. And I hope for the next round of questions that someone will ask me about the SA plan of action on racism and xenophobia. Thank you.
Actually, can I just add something to the gentleman at the back? South African refugee law is amazing on paper. It's one of the most progressive out there. People have papers. The papers are just not working. You can have a refugee status or your asylum seeker permit, but the bank turns you away. But provisions to work and study in South Africa are there. So how do you work without a bank account? So that's why we fall prey to exploitation, because which company is going to hire you without a bank account? It's not going to pay you cash. So the papers are there. The problem is just, why are the papers not working? And when the papers are there, they're asking us to renew it every month. We're spending 2 to 3 days out of work, out of school, etc. So those are intentional hurdles put so that you don't go forward. So sometimes people think that when you have an asylum seeker permit, you are an illegal immigrant, which is completely incorrect. The papers are there, they're just not working.
Maybe this brother there to say.
Yeah. So there was a question about how the internalization of apartheid structures feed into what we're seeing, if I got you correctly. And I think it's quite a valid observation. And apartheid structures do play a significant part in feeding into what we're seeing today. Earlier, I alluded to the historical reality of apartheid, which assumed a belligerent and isolationist stance in relation to the rest of the continent. And I think the damage that was done by that still hasn't been adequately dealt with and dismantled, and a lot of work still needs to go into that. At the risk of repetition, in saying that South Africa needs to cultivate its Pan-African identity at large as a society, because that sort of identification with the rest of the continent is missing, and it's fully lacking, and a lot of it can be attributed to the apartheid past. And maybe just dealing with this xenophobia versus Afrophobia. I'm in no way suggesting that or downplaying Afrophobia. What I'm suggesting is that if you're moving from a standard definition of xenophobia, it speaks about a fault line which is an othering based on nationality. And then I make the concession when I started speaking that in the South African context in particular, it then shifts, and then there's a more pronounced dimension which speaks to othering based on nationality, but from within the continent. So I'm not so sure if the suggestion is that these two are mutually exclusive and different, but I think these two are mutually reinforcing. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that it's an othering, and there's a shift that's more pronounced, that there's an othering based on sort of intra-African, call it hatred, or whatever you could term it, but it's definitely is a more pronounced dimension of what I think is a broader structural xenophobic sentiment that exists in South African society. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, comrades, let's keep it short now. We need to be closing. So yeah, the last 4 now.
Okay, the last 4 questions.
The others you'll ask questions when we are eating and networking. That's the best part.
1, 2, 3. Okay, wait.
No, please don't bully my colleague.
Can you see that?
Yeah, just choose.
Right now.
You can't feel your favor.
Okay. I'm going to start this side. I'm going to give it to the woman. So 3 women and 1. So you number 3, and 1 male is needed.
Representation.
Okay. 6. Okay, maybe 6. Let's make it 6.
No. Yeah, just this.
2 more people.
No,
Two more
we need
people.
to close. We'll ask questions outside. They are not going anywhere. The speakers are not going anywhere. So let's just keep it to 4. Then we close. Then we'll ask outside. So please, yeah, just give the mic to the first one. I need to be fair.
Good evening, everyone. Before I just speak, I really have to wrap because I have to speak very fast. All right, first I'd really like to thank, Africa Matters team and also you, Sai, for just organizing this, because really this is an amazing space, especially for somebody who has always experienced, bullying in this space, being told, I'm from Zimbabwe originally, and I've never felt like I'm at home, although I've lived in South Africa almost all my life, but I've never really felt at home because this country has always spat me out, you know what I mean? Until when, okay, now my question is, until when are we always going to feel like we don't belong? Because at the summit earlier on, I actually spoke and I was saying, I can go into a taxi, right? And the way I sound, I'm always judged by the way I speak. Hey, you don't sound African, you try to sound white, and that's not the case. I go into a taxi, and all I can say is, Molweni or Imani, short left Malume, and that's about it, right? As soon as I say, sorry, where's Vit? Hey, no, you don't talk like that. They swearing at me, they're saying that. Okay, fine. So until when? Because I am tired. I don't want to lie to you. I am sick and tired of always having now to say, okay, well, I now need to learn how to be South African. I'm not South African. I am from Zimbabwe. I am Shona speaking. I don't speak your languages, but I also just deserve to feel like I belong. So what exactly is the next step? Because we can talk about this. I'm sorry, I'm shaking, my hands are cold. Yeah, we can talk about this a lot, but then until when? What can be done so that we feel like we belong? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation you guys have made. I am Nigerian born, Nigerian mother, South African father, and constantly I had my mom, especially during the xenophobic attacks, complain about how Nigeria did so much in terms of when she was younger and when they were working, they paid the tax. South Africans living in Nigeria during apartheid got free accommodation, got free education. There's a whole sphere of things they got. I mentioned this to an NPO, a non-profit organization I'm part of, where we try to go and communicate positive narratives around what's happening. And that's composed of, we had one Zimbabwean, one Congolese person, one South African, and one American person, and myself. And we actually looked to put together narratives around what the other African countries did. And the one guy put together a summary just for us to go and choose which countries. And we were so shocked with the wealth of information. I only knew from a Nigerian point of view because my mother, but he's put a summary around Libya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Zambia. And I'm thinking, why is that not communicated to South Africans in terms of what was done during apartheid? How other African countries supported South Africa in terms of the fight against apartheid?
Thank you. And some months back, I went to Rwanda, and I met somebody there, and I said to her, "What tribe are you?" She said, "What? They don't know what is tribe. They all Rwandans." So it brings me back to South Africa. When I came to South Africa, I found that South Africa is an extremely divisive society. Even among themselves, they've got problems. And then I started to experience this xenophobia or Afrophobia, as you call it. And then I need a lot of friends who are South Africans just to understand their standpoint, their viewpoint. And what I found is that the other time I listened to the radio, and they were talking about the problem of one-sided story. So when you're talking about Afrophobia, you are looking, I listened to her, I could feel, I can empathize with her feeling. I could almost feel her feelings because she lived the feeling. There is always two sides to all this story. So
for foreigners who come to South Africa, many of them become Afrophobia because they are at an age at all time, conscious of your foreigners. And then she said they then cluster among themselves to protect themselves. They become Afrophobia. And she is extremely angry, but the South Africans are extremely angry. And who is at fault? So I've looked at this whole story, and as things unfold, being that I came from somewhere, I see this country heading towards where I'm running from. You haven't seen your country falling. If it collapses and falls one day, where are you going to run? If you go to Europe, you are an African. Some people actually in Europe believe that Africa is one place. It's high time we speak to ourselves. South Africa, he said that there is so many good policies. True. South Africa has the best constitution in the world, as far as I'm concerned, based on values of human dignity. But the way we treat each other, even they say that lions don't eat lions, but we eat ourselves. And then brings me to another thing. When you raise kids here, you're not just teaching your kids morality, you're teaching them self-confidence, because even in the school, children are bullied because they're not South Africans. And so they destroy because they start to question themselves and lack dignity. So the implication of Afrophobia, it's hectic on South Africans, it's intense on foreigners, or on Black foreigners who are actually either instigating or accepting the Afrophobic thing. So it's really a wide thing. My question is actually this. I chose to attend this conversation because I feel like it's high time. Communication is so important, it's so vital. And in that sense, Home Affairs is the entrance, is the door, well, the legitimate door into this country. They are failure in reaching out to South Africans and reaching out to the foreigners. And then you see foreigners come here and do stuff they can never do in their own country because they're already edged out. And so there is no dignity to them, and therefore they don't regard anything with dignity. Guys, if we take away our dignity, we are worse than animals. And so it starts with each and every one of us. We are not the cause, generally, of the problem of the society. We are the cause of our own actions. Where does it start? Where does it end? It starts with, like Michael Jackson said, it starts with the man in the mirror. Not with I've got 20 white friends, or I've got 30 non-African friends, or I've got tonight. I don't know how many we are here. If your take home is to go home and look at yourself in the mirror and examine your thoughts and your beliefs and what is the standing behind your beliefs, Aristotle said that unexamined life is not worth living. At the end of the day, you're going to lie down on the bed. That's what I say to myself all the time. One day, each and every one of us are going to leave this world. When you are leaving the world on your bed, on your dying bed, what will be your justification? What have you learned? What have you practiced? So we need to face ourselves in the mirror and live the policies and live the Home Affairs of this world. It starts with you and it starts with me. Ask yourself, interrogate yourself. What do I believe? If you hate me, you don't even know my name. Hate me because I did something to you, not because of the color of my skin, white or black. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Je m'appelle Leo for the ones that speak French, and Lindromne Leo Ndawabe for the ones that speak Tonga. But anyways, I'm here. Thank you for having this event. It's very much important to have such dialogues. This is the situation. I'm not going to go too much into myself because I'm going to speak forever and ever about how we were the first group of South Africans to go into white schools. I'm one of those after apartheid. Thanks, but what I would like to basically say is that this is the situation, just from the speakers that I hear. Firstly, like how, like personally, you hate townships. Please don't hate townships. People live there. People like you and me live there. People that can be better than us live there. So let's not hate. There's projects like de-densification. I know from the township, there's Alexandra as well. What they're trying to do so that you have a better understanding. It's clustered, yes. They need to try to get people out so that they can develop. But then obviously the process is money, is land, is corruption, is this people not doing their work and all of that. But there is hope, so at least let's have a positive outlook on townships because that's where our hubs are. Even insurance companies are advertising locally. If you watch a game of Golden Arrows, you won't see it on SuperSport, you'll see it on SABC, you won't see Chiefs and Pirates there because they know that most of the people are the people that would be from formerly disadvantaged backgrounds. So we need to change that outlook as we are all academic. And then in terms of Swahili availability, I like what you said, but unfortunately, a lot of people do not have a lot of info. There's an alternative satellite TV provider, Starset. They have Swahili channels there. So that's something that maybe we could start looking at, telling people about that. Actually, there's Swahili. You can even find out what kind of language it is, at least conscientize people, rather than just to say, hey, there's nothing happening, because it would be like we're speaking, on opposite sides of the coin. And then, in terms of Afrophobia, especially in town with the task force and everything, that's a bad thing. Unfortunately, the people that voted for the current mayor, and he does not have a clear understanding of what being African is, because Obiene is a person of privilege. Remember, this is a person that started Black like me. So back in the days, he already had privilege, while all of us were being chased and everything. So you need to understand the type of people that you do put in office. So he doesn't have an understanding of what needs to happen, hence the task force. Before then, such things did not exist. But obviously there was no problem. So we need to have a look at governance, especially at a local level, especially come 2021. So you can tell the people that can vote there. And then lastly, Doctor, just a simple comment. In terms of, you see, here in South Africa, we have a very unique history of apartheid. And when we had a government of national unity, there wasn't like bloodshed to say that this government taking out this one coup d'etat type scenario. So we are in the teething process. Everything that we're doing, even now, me standing in front of you, this is a teething process. And you speaking with us here, obviously you're gonna pick up something new. So what we need you to do is to consider the history that you have, and then at least try to work with that going forward. Because now if you're saying, no, we want this should be like that. Now why must we speak your language like you're saying? All of those things, you must think. There was like Bantu stands, apartheid special planning. There was a lot of things that happened that actually got us to get South Africa to where it is today. So we need to have a look at those things so that we can work together in terms of like fixing them. The story about the municipality in Vuan, it's actually called Collins Chaban municipality. And yes, there's still problems. Even now with the elections last week, there was problems there as well. So it's basically vendor people saying we cannot be led by Tsonga people. And Tsonga people saying, but we can lead you. So we need to like, so it's a big issue. So we need to sit down. Firstly, we need to get our people to be more involved. I looked up African youth, African youth charter. It took me a while, even now, to remember it. Like you can see, it's something that's very far from everybody's mind. So what you need to do as steps going forward is also social media, digital marketer, strategist, and all of that. I think you need to work on analytics from Google. Those things are free, we can help you if you need, so that at least more relevant info like the African Youth Charter comes up when you type in African youth, then the next thing should be charter, not African youth problems. You can even try it on Google. But that's the reality of the situation, unfortunately, and I'm sorry that I have to tell you that. But yeah, we need to fix all of that so that at least relevant information comes up a lot quicker on Google. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it is our responsibility to make sure that we bring this information to our people from wherever they are. And one of those things that we need to focus on is make that information availability. I'm not going to go too much onto data must fall. Hey, it's not me. And there's a hand clap, so let me sit down. But I'd really like for you to have more of these. I do give feedback on the emails that you do send me, and your newsletters. I'll go through them when I do get them. And yeah, I'm looking forward. By the way, that's my niece, and she's doing a good job. Everybody give her a round of applause.
Yeah, allow us to finish. Allow us to finish. I'm going to be very short because the previous speaker spoke largely on some of the things I wanted to touch on. Look, the whole idea of Afrophobia is lazy thinking and doesn't exist. What is the difference between Afrophobia and xenophobia? Xenophobia is when you have a specific feeling towards people who come from other countries. And Afrophobia currently is defined as what? When you hate a specific group, maybe particularly Africans. That whole concept is false. And that's why it's important to look at the South African history. Look, where do these xenophobic attacks happen? They happen mostly in townships, where we're born, where we live. And why do they happen there? There are no jobs there. Food in South Africa is expensive. Our people are languishing in poverty. The thing is, when you go outside of South Africa, they show your Sandton, they show your Cape Town, you see these beautiful places, then you think that everything is lovely-dovey. While really, outside of Alexandra, there's so many informal settlements where a lot of our people are struggling. And when a lot of our people are frustrated, the first thing they will do is probably they want to hit your shop. They want to take the food. They want to feed their families. They want to feed their mothers. They want to feed their kids. They will do that. So the issue here is the issue of economics. So as soon as there is a better economy that can provide for our people here, in that way, most people in townships, they will have jobs. They'll be able to provide for their families. In that way, they won't be frustrated. You will never see these attacks happening in your beautiful places like your Sandton and many other places. They only happen where our people are struggling. So the whole idea of Afrophobia is really lazy thinking from academics. Second, and my sister, they should say it's difficult to get a card. Oh, yeah, you're saying, look, you must get a permanent resident. If you get permanent resident, you get anything. It's simple like that. No, I know that it's not easy to get permanent residents, that I know. But I'm saying if you have permanent residents, you get access to the services. That I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Can the guest speakers answer? Sorry for the in-depth questions you guys received, but I hope you guys are able to answer every one of them.
Yeah, please, very shortly because we're running out of time. Very short. Okay, conference.
I think a lot of them were comments more than questions. And maybe just a brief response is just to say that I honestly think, in as much as we trying to reimagine township spaces, I honestly think that they do more harm than good and more harm than good. I grew up in a township. I know exactly what you're talking about. The redeeming qualities of the township are few and far between. But anyway, I'm happy to have that conversation offline after this. Yeah, I honestly do not want to downplay the the experiences, the lived experiences, which I think are extremely important of people from countries of other African origin. And I think it's important that we take heed and we listen to their story instead of dismissing them and saying that it's purely lazy thinking. So I really want to resist that thinking. Thanks.
I was honestly waiting for a comment like that, and I think it popped into my mind when our sister was talking about the fact that we should not hate one another because of the color of our skins. It's not like we've done anything to you, or it's not like we've done anything to each other. In my mind, I was thinking, but that isn't necessarily where it stems from. The idea is that there is thinking that people have done something to the people that are exhibiting, xenophobic or Afrophobic attacks or whatever you want to call it. And it stems from all these socioeconomic issues that our brother has raised. Socioeconomic issues are not things in the air that politicians put in their speeches to entice us. They're things that are real. And so, not downplaying the fact that other perspectives, we've just had a whole discussion about the struggles that foreign nationals face, but I was waiting for something like this because now we can go into the deeper conversation as to what we, as a collective, think should be the solution to these economic problems. How do we hold our governments accountable for these different situations? Because that is what he said was true. People are suffering, people don't have jobs, people are genuinely suffering. It's not necessarily a justification for the horrific endeavors that have been going on. But I think that a greater question is to be how we should go forward into trying to fix our economy. That should be a greater conversation that we should have, and I hope that we have it either here or later.
So, firstly, I think equating xenophobic attacks to townships is lazy thinking. I grew up in a suburb. I've never lived in a township, but I've experienced Afrophobia numerous times. The fact that people think Afrophobia is only valid when it's violent is lazy thinking. Yeah, no, it's beyond me. Also, telling someone that they need to get a PR is torturous. I've had an asylum seeker permit and I've had to renew every single month for 20 years. I'd love a PR. I mean, where are they giving them out? The ladder that you have to climb to get documentation in South Africa is non-existent. And this is why I do what I do, because I need to go out there and tell people that what you think is happening is incorrect. We are not living our best lives. We are not living in sanity. We don't have cartels that we just go and open a suitcase and get money from. That's not how it works. If you give someone a document that they have to use for 20 years, then give them a bank account. That's what I'm saying. For someone like me, who's been here 20 years, 25 years, every time I meet someone, they're like, oh, but you're a citizen, of course. No, that's not how it works. I'd really like you to go and search the road to PR, it's probably 5 sentences. Now, come and speak to me and ask me for my road to PR, and it's 25 years worth of sentences. Sorry, what was your name again? I think belonging is far-fetched in South Africa. We live with Black brothers and sisters, South Africans, who don't belong either. They're struggling to belong. And yeah, of course, it's not a reason for them to treat us the way that they do, but I always say, I don't use the arguments of, well, we helped you guys when you were apartheid, why don't you help us? For those that are spiritual and you know, the Bible says, don't let your left hand see what your right hand, da, 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 da. And for me, it's about basic humanity. It's not about what I did for you that you can do for me. It's about basic humanity. Why is it that for us, migrants, Ubuntu is not applicable?
I don't think I can speak up to that. I think it was really powerful, and I just want to say that I felt the power in the panel too. I'll end up with 3 quick things. There was someone who mentioned putting stories together of people who went to other countries, and I think that's so powerful. So I've been very fortunate to spend time with a lot of veterans in the country. And my first trip to Tanzania, I had beach tips from a veteran who spent time in exile there. And I think maybe an outcome for I in Africa Matters is have a panel with ANC veterans who spend time in other countries to come and tell their stories. I think that would be fantastic because many of them have been silent, and let's draw on their wisdom and their experiences. The second thing I'd say is, which country in the world has ever gotten over discrimination? Discrimination exists everywhere, either by race, either by Afrophobia, xenophobia, gender. And I think that it's up to all of us to always respect other people. And I think these sort of gatherings, it reminds me a lot of racism in South Africa and how we need to run these gatherings. And there's a lot to learn from the Mandela generation of holding these gatherings with respect for each other, listening to each other, and empathizing. I then also want to end off because I truly do feel hurt when I hear about these xenophobic attacks as well. I remember being in Tunisia when I heard about the latest one. And I said it would be disingenuous to say that I come from South Africa while my African brothers are being killed, etc. And when I heard you speak, it's a story that I've heard from so many people everywhere. And I think the one thing is the leaders in our society haven't apologized. But I want all of you sitting here today to know that someone born in this country says that you belong, and I'm that person. And I just want to apologize on behalf of the population for what you've been through. It wouldn't be a lot, but I think that it's time that we start to, as South Africans, to really apologize for what's going on and start to have open dialogue. And I think that I hope there was someone who said, you know, the way you treat us affects how we treat you. And I want you to remember that not everyone is the same. And I think in every population, it's about how do we draw on those who value human rights and who value you as a person and you being in our country. So I do apologize. I'm not the most important leader in the country, but I want you to know that South Africa is your home.
Thank you to everyone. Just final closing remarks, then we can go and have the favorite part of this. I just want to mention a few words. First of all, comrades, I think that next time if such events happen is let us let people speak, and if you disagree, don't shout, hey, you are misinformed, hey, what. We should just be silent and wait for someone to finish. But anyways, I just want to come because I'm doing a research on this, as I mentioned earlier on. And I just want to state that when one gets an asylum seeker permit, or a refugee status permit. But let me first distinguish, because I think people were talking and they do not know the distinction. The first process is when one flees their country due to political fear or anything that threatens their life. They run into a country. The first thing they do get is an asylum seeker. They apply for an asylum seeker permit. The asylum seeker permit then is given to the individual. And what happens later is that they are allowed to stay in the country pending their refugee status. So if I can memorize very well, if I can remember section 23 is the asylum seeker, I don't know what section 24 is the refugee status. Then all this in the Immigration Act have their own different objectives. So, and these are all supported by international statute. As you know, the United Nations Human Rights Commission for Refugees, and so on and so forth, right? That countries are signatory to, right? Under public international law. So when one gets that, even in Europe, they are allowed to work and have access to bank accounts. But the issue is this: there are certain banks such as ABSA who claim to be African in their motto, and ABSA changed. Remember, they changed their logo and said that African Bank, African Estate. I don't know if you go to Park Station or the Gautrain, you see ABSA saying African City, what city, all these things trying to rebrand themselves to say because they were under Barclays Africa. Remember, they were under Barclays Africa before Barclays left. You know that ABSA is part of. Yeah. So so there are certain banks that don't want to do this, but certain banks like Nedbank, I know are doing this for certain people, and certain people they say no or yes.
Branches.
Yeah, certain branches also. So just to conclude, I think that needs to be looked at, and as well, the need for a United Africa is more important now than ever, because I believe that if you look at the European Union, when it was in its happy days before Britain started saying I'm pulling out, I mean, you could see that their economic development, their economic growth was fine. And I believe that in Africa, there's a need for unity for Africa to be able to see its economic growth and the growth development of its economy. And I think that can be fueled by transport, for people to, because it's expensive to fly in Africa, there are no low budget airlines to fly to different countries, and I think that's one thing that needs to be looked at. Anyways, I'm being told, let me just, about the food, just read something. Yeah, the food is, it's served outside, the wraps are halal, there's vegetarian and vegan options too, there's wine, there's water and juice. So let us go out there, eat and discuss with one another. Thank you very much for attending once again.